They started pouring asphalt on my land at 6:42 in the morning. No warning, no paperwork. Just a convoy of orange-vested workers turning my family's wheat field into a godforsaken parking lot like it belonged to them. One guy even had the gall to wave at me like I was the intruder on my own land. I was still barefoot, standing on the porch in disbelief, watching bulldozers tear into generations of soil. My fists were clenched. My pulse was thunder. I asked them who gave permission. They pointed to the woman in the white blazer and mirrored sunglasses, HOA President Karen Holloway. She smirked at me like this was some petty landscaping project. "It's community infrastructure," she said. "You should be proud we're choosing your lot." That was the moment she made the worst mistake of her life. Because what she didn't know, what no one in the HOA knew, was that my brother is a sitting federal judge. And this wasn't just trespassing. This was about to become a federal case. What do you do when someone paves over your life and smiles while doing it? It started with the sound of metal grinding into earth. I remember the time exactly because I had just poured my first cup of coffee and was reaching for the sugar jar when the noise hit me. Low, mechanical, and wrong. Not like a tractor or plow, but the deep rumble of commercial-grade diesel engines. I stepped onto my porch barefoot, the old wood creaking under my heel, and what I saw nearly made me drop the mug. My field, my family's field, was swarming with heavy machinery. Bulldozers, graders, and a cement mixer positioned like tanks ready for battle. Orange-vested men moved with brutal efficiency, digging trenches, spray painting the earth, and tearing through the wheat I'd spent 2 years planting and nurturing. The golden heads of grain fell in waves beneath the machines, crushed without ceremony. A long steel fence post was already being jackhammered into the soil that had been in my bloodline for 6 generations. I marched across the gravel, yelling over the roar of engines. "What the hell are you doing on my land?" I barked, but the foreman barely looked up. "Talk to the HOA," he shouted, nodding toward the white SUV parked at the edge of the field like a general overseeing a siege. That's when I saw her, Karen Holloway. HOA president, local tyrant, and human smirk, wrapped in a blazer. She wore oversized sunglasses like she was heading to a Malibu brunch, clipboard in hand and a Bluetooth headset in her ear. She didn't approach me. She waited until I came to her. "Karen," I said, fists clenched, "this is my land." Her eyes never left her clipboard. "Actually," she said with the casual venom of a woman who'd practiced this line in the mirror, "according to our updated jurisdictional maps, this parcel falls under HOA zoning jurisdiction 4B, designated for community infrastructure expansion." I blinked, stunned. "That's a lie. My family's owned this land since 1867. You have no right to be here." "Did you read the charter when you bought the property?" she asked, still not looking up. "I inherited it," I snapped. "I never joined any HOA." She smiled then, just barely, and pulled a manila folder from under her arm. "According to County Registrar updates from 2014, your property was absorbed during the Boundary Redistricting Initiative. The board voted to include you in HOA coverage for public safety and easement development. As such, you're subject to Article 9, Section 2.3, Temporary Land Reassignment for Essential Community Projects." Her words were so polished I knew she had rehearsed them. I grabbed the folder. My name was on the document, in print, not signature, and the land plot was listed under some kind of community overflow initiative. "You can't do this," I said, voice low now. "You have no legal authority." That made her look up. "Then I guess you'll have to sue us," she said sweetly. "But in the meantime, construction is on schedule." Behind her, a bulldozer crashed through a line of young birch trees, their trunks snapping like bones. I turned back toward the field, fury boiling under my skin. Half of the southern plot had already been leveled. Spray paint lines now zigzagged across my alfalfa rows, and one of the workers had begun stacking rebar near the irrigation channel. "You're trespassing," I said, jaw tight. "Actually, you're obstructing, and that," Karen said, flipping to another sheet, "is a 2,500 fine under subsection." "I didn't agree to any of this," I shouted. "And you never had my permission?" "Permission?" she laughed. "This isn't a request, sweetheart, it's policy." Then she turned, already calling out to one of the workers about concrete delivery times. I stood there for a second, stunned, as if someone had just slapped me. My boots were sinking into the ground, but it wasn't mud. It was wheat stalks being turned into pulp beneath construction boots. They were destroying everything, not just the crop, but the soil, the root systems, the fence lines, the irrigation. One guy unrolled cable spools directly over the field drainage trench, clogging it with gravel. I pulled out my phone and started filming. If they were going to turn this into a war, I'd need every inch of it documented. I took photos of everything: the bulldozers, the new survey markers, the broken fence, the barrels of industrial primer labeled Fast Cure Sealant. Then I walked back to the porch, hands trembling, and made the one call that would change everything. "Levi," I said when he picked up. "I need you." My brother's voice came through like stone. "What's happening?" "They're building a parking lot on my land. The HOA forged papers. They say it's legal." There was a pause. Then, "Send me everything, right now." I emailed him the photos, scans, and a recording of Karen's speech. Within minutes, he responded with a list of questions only a federal judge would ask. Parcel numbers, surveyor names, county office timestamps. "I want every interaction on record," he said. "Don't threaten them. Don't confront them again. Just gather, quietly." "Levi," I said, "they're destroying everything." "Then we'll destroy them," he said calmly. "But we'll do it legally, surgically." I looked out across the field as another swath of earth was peeled back by a grader. My father had taught me how to till this land with a mule and a steel plow. His ashes were buried at the base of the old oak tree they'd just bulldozed. That field fed 4 generations. Now it was being flattened for a goddamn parking lot. But Karen didn't know who she was messing with. Because this wasn't just about crops. It wasn't just about land. It was about legacy. And my brother wasn't just a lawyer. He was a federal judge. Karen hadn't just stepped on a private field. She had walked straight into federal jurisdiction. The next blow didn't come with a wrecking ball or a bulldozer. It came in a plain white envelope taped to my door with a bright red urgent stamp and a watermark from the HOA Legal Subcommittee. Inside was a formal violation notice for obstructing community progress, accompanied by a fine of $30 for refusing to yield my land for the parking lot. It claimed I was in breach of easement cooperation under community expansion regulations, whatever that meant. The letter cited obscure codes I'd never seen before, written in bureaucratic camouflage, the kind of language that only makes sense when you've already lost. At the bottom was a line that made my skin crawl. Failure to comply within 7 days will result in escalating enforcement and lien placement. And true to their word, 3 days later I received notice from the county clerk's office. A lien had been placed on my house for noncompliance, for land that had never belonged to them in the first place. I stormed into the zoning office that same day, fists full of documents, maps, original property surveys that dated back to 1921. The clerk, a thin, pale man who looked like he hadn't seen daylight since fax machines were invented, typed a few keys into his terminal and raised his eyebrows. "Well," he said slowly, "your property is listed here as HOA Access Easement Certified." "Since when?" I snapped. He tapped a few more keys, then rotated the screen toward me. There it was, a digital file dated January 9th, 2 months prior, with my name typed neatly at the bottom. Next to it, a squiggly, pixelated scrawl of a signature that looked vaguely like mine if you dipped a stick in mud and closed your eyes. "That's not my signature," I said. "That's a forgery," the clerk shrugged. "You'll have to file a dispute." "I'm disputing it right now." "Legally," he clarified, eyes flicking toward the security camera in the corner. "You'll need to open a claim with the Zoning Appeals Board. Could take 90 days. They'll have paved my whole damn farm by then." He didn't respond. Just handed me a clipboard with a complaint form and returned to his screen like I no longer existed. When I returned home, the driveway was blocked by 2 trucks from a local contractor company, neither of which I'd hired. One of them was unloading metal beams. The other was setting up concrete forms along the north boundary of my field. My dog barked like hell from the back porch. The men didn't even look at me. I walked down to confront the site foreman. He was middle-aged, heavy-set, with a neck tattoo that vanished into his collar. "You're on private property," I said. "This is trespassing." He pulled out a clipboard, flipping to a laminated permit. "We got full authorization from the HOA." I grabbed the permit. The address was correct. The parcel number, mine. And at the bottom, there it was again. My forged signature, this time printed on a contractor access agreement, labeled Community Easement, Phase 2. "Get off my land," I said through clenched teeth. He stared at me for a moment. "Look, man, I'm just following work orders." "You got a problem. Take it up with your board." "They're not my board." He shrugged and walked away, waving to the cement truck that had just pulled in behind him. That night, the power flickered off at 9:13 p.m. and didn't come back on. I called the utility company, and they told me there was no record of an outage in my area. "Your account shows a voluntary service suspension," the woman said. "Requested this morning at 8:42 a.m. "By who?" I asked. "Well, the file lists a representative from your homeowners association. They have no legal control over my utilities. That's between you and them," she said before hanging up. The next morning, my mailbox was empty, not just of letters, but of everything. The whole unit was gone, dug out from the base, leaving a shallow hole and a scattering of screws in the gravel. I reported it. 2 days later, the sheriff's office said they were investigating the matter, but had no suspects. Meanwhile, HOA citations kept arriving, slipped under my door, tacked to my gate, even delivered once by a boy in a scout uniform, and then the water shut off. I turned the tap on a hot Tuesday morning and got nothing but a dry, groaning hiss. The utility company said the main had been marked for emergency maintenance pending cooperative property approval. When I asked who made the request, the woman on the other end paused, then said, "Sorry, I'm not authorized to give out that information." I slammed the phone down so hard the screen cracked. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just being harassed, I was being isolated, cut off, squeezed. This wasn't about a parking lot anymore. It was about control. I called Levi again, my brother, the federal judge, who didn't speak in panic or raise his voice unless someone was bleeding. "They forged my signature again," I said. "Utilities are shutting down, mailbox stolen, property seized by paperwork." "Send me every document," he said. "Every signature, every timestamp, every name." I did. That night, Levi called back with a tone I hadn't heard from him since the day he sentenced a man to 35 years in federal prison. "This goes deeper than we thought," he said. "I'm seeing the same 3 names appear in 5 different HOA filings across 2 counties. Karen Holloway is linked to all of them. So this isn't her first time?" "No," he said. "And if I'm right, she's been using HOA expansions to absorb private property for nearly a decade. It's racketeering, wire fraud. Maybe even RICO if we find enough victims." He told me to stay calm, stay quiet, and keep collecting evidence. "We'll need a pattern," he said. "I'm building a timeline." But Karen wasn't waiting. She was doubling down. On Friday, I woke to find a 40-gallon drum buried halfway into the field runoff trench. It wasn't sealed. A slick brown sludge leaked out across the topsoil, flowing into the irrigation line like blood into a wound. The smell hit me first. Chemical, toxic, wrong. I followed the pipeline upstream, flashlight in hand, and found another drum, half submerged and leaking. And standing next to it, cigarette in mouth, was a man in denim overalls and work boots, prying open the lid of a 3rd barrel. "Who sent you?" I asked. He turned casually, not surprised to see me. "HOA directive," he said flatly. "Karen said dump the sealant along the south edge. Kill the weeds before the concrete goes in." "That's farmland," I said. "It's crop rotation soil. There are no weeds." "Look, I just do what I'm paid to. Get out," I said, voice low and dangerous. "Now." He didn't argue. Just got in his truck and drove off, tires spitting gravel behind him. I documented everything: video, photos, soil samples, timestamps. I installed 2 hidden cameras under the fence line that night, and within 48 hours, they recorded 3 more men unloading drums into the field. I traced the license plate. Levi ran it through a private legal database. The truck was registered to a shell company owned by HOA Development Trust, LLC, Karen's private holding group. When I confronted her at a public HOA meeting, she laughed. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, flipping through a stack of paperwork. "We don't engage in chemical landscaping without board approval, and as far as I'm aware, we filed nothing of the sort." But she was lying, and I had her on tape. The camera under the fence caught her visiting the site herself 2 nights earlier, standing beside a barrel while a man in gloves rolled it downhill into the trench. She wasn't smiling that night. She was pointing, directing, orchestrating. That image burned into my mind like acid, her silhouette framed against the moonlit field, hand extended like a general commanding troops. This was no longer incompetence. It was calculated. I saved the footage, backed it up to 3 hard drives, sent a copy to Levi. Karen thought she was erasing me, but every move she made was only adding fuel to a fire she couldn't see yet. A fire I was about to set loose, legally, precisely, and with devastating effect. She thought the paperwork protected her. But soon, she'd learn what it meant to play games in a world where federal court doesn't care about HOA bylaws, only the truth. And I was about to make damn sure the truth buried her. The morning after I caught them dumping poison into my runoff trench, I met my brother at a diner just off Highway 12. He arrived exactly on time, wearing a plain gray windbreaker over his dress shirt. No robe, no bailiff, no courtroom formality, but the weight he carried made the air shift when he entered. Levi had that look he used to get when a defendant lied under oath, calm, measured, but with something razor-sharp behind the eyes. I slid a flash drive across the table. Footage from 3 nights. Karen shows up personally in one of them. He nodded, didn't speak, plugged the drive into his laptop right there between the syrup bottle and a chipped sugar dispenser. He watched 30 seconds of the video, her silhouette, the barrels, the gloves, the truck with the forged company logo, then closed the lid. "We're done waiting," he said. "But I can't move on this directly. Judicial ethics. You need someone who's not bound by the bench." That's when he told me about Dana Cho, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Western District. Former Army, JAG, worked under him as a clerk 10 years ago and now spearheaded property fraud investigations like she was born to rip the flesh off zoning scams. "She's brutal," he said. "And she doesn't flinch." That afternoon, I met her in a federal office 3 towns over. She stood when I entered, short, black blazer, sharp eyes, and didn't bother with small talk. "You have photos?" she asked. "Yes." "Videos?" "Yes." "Original deed?" "Back to 1921. "Current zoning file?" I pulled it out, unfolded it across the desk. "Forged. Signatures not mine. Wasn't notarized. They filed it in January under an HOA development project called South Lot Conversion. I didn't even know about it until the graders showed up." She scanned the page once. "Forgery, misrepresentation of land use, interference with federal mail, environmental endangerment. If this went through digital channels, we're looking at wire fraud." It did. I showed her the PDF I'd received from the zoning board, emailed directly to me after my request to view the easement documents again. The reply came from the HOA's legal department, attached to a formal-sounding letter with Karen's signature at the bottom and a .gov address spoofed to look authentic. But Dana spotted it immediately. "It passed through a server in North Carolina," she said. "That's interstate communication. That's ours." She sat back, crossed her arms, and just like Levi promised, didn't blink. "Let's build a case file." We spent 4 hours assembling everything. Dates, maps, camera timestamps, every HOA citation I'd received, every time the mailbox was tampered with, every drum of chemical sludge captured on video. Dana was methodical. She flagged every item with a sticky note, numbered and color-coded by violation type. "Karen thinks this is a land dispute," I said. "She still calls it a miscommunication," Dana smirked, but her eyes stayed cold. "That's because she doesn't understand federal jurisdiction. She's been getting away with municipal-level intimidation for years." But she stepped on the wrong neck this time. We filed the preliminary complaint under a sealed federal docket. Dana moved fast. Her team issued subpoenas to the zoning office, the county registrar, the utility companies, and the HOA board without alerting anyone. Every email, every permit, every forged line item, all quietly collected, time-stamped, preserved. Karen didn't even know the net was tightening. She kept bragging about the progress at the latest HOA meeting, holding up glossy renderings of the new parking lot like she was unveiling a shopping center. "The lot is nearly complete," she beamed, standing in front of a projector screen in the community clubhouse. "We're so proud of what we're building, a shared vision created for future generations." I sat in the back watching. So did Dana. So did Levi. Stone-faced, silent. Karen had no idea half the people in that room were either recording her or cooperating under subpoena, and she certainly didn't know that her every boast was reinforcing a criminal timeline. Because 2 days after her speech, my cameras caught the final nail. 3 HOA board members, not just contractors, unloading unmarked barrels from a rented trailer at midnight. One of them, Dean Barrow, had been the treasurer for 9 years. Another, Lisa Keller, worked part-time at the county clerk's office. That footage, time-stamped, night vision clear, showed them rolling the drums straight onto my land and cracking the lids open to pour sealant into the water line. Dean was laughing. Lisa was holding a flashlight. Karen wasn't there, but she didn't need to be. Her name was all over the authorization memos we found in her HOA Gmail account, obtained through a subpoena Dana served just 48 hours after we confirmed she used that address to send zoning files. The memos were damning. Internal emails between Karen and her development committee discussing which neighboring properties were vulnerable for expansion. Notes about creating administrative burdens to encourage sale. References to paper. Pressure, a term Dana flagged immediately as code for targeted violations. And then came the worst one, a message from Karen to Dean dated 2 weeks before the construction started. It read, "The Carter parcel is ideal. Old family property. Sentimental value means less mobility. Push hard on utilities. Leverage code enforcement. If he resists, cite him for obstruction. If he escalates, we'll say he's unstable. It's not about who's right. It's about who gets buried in paperwork first." Dana printed that email, pinned it to the center of our caseboard. "This," she said, "is what kills her in court." We baited them again, quietly, surgically. I filed a second request to view the HOA's easement certification, this time posing as a prospective buyer through a shell account Dana created for legal entrapment. Sure enough, we received a new version of the document. Same plot number, different layout. This time the signature was mine again, forged, clumsily. But now it had a new layer. An electronic approval stamp, dated and sourced through a third-party verification service. Except it didn't come from me, and it crossed state servers during transmission. That was federal wire fraud. Dana's team flagged it instantly and pulled metadata, showing not only when it was signed, but from whose IP address. It was Karen's, from her own home router. We had it all now. Timeline, motive, false documents, environmental violations, property sabotage, digital fraud, and personal corruption. All that was left was the drop. But Karen was still parading around like she'd won. She published a full-page spread in the HOA newsletter about our beautiful new community parking lot, generously located on shared-use land adjacent to the Carter farm. Shared-use land. That phrase repeated 5 times in her article. Levi read it with a dead expression and said, "That's going to look real poetic when she's reading it from a holding cell." Dana didn't wait. She filed the criminal indictment under federal seal, a quiet storm about to erupt. Karen still thought this was a neighborhood spat. She didn't know she'd just walked into a courtroom that didn't run on HOA bylaws and small-town backroom deals. She'd committed crimes that had 4-digit federal codes. And in that world, the rules were different. They don't issue citations. They issue warrants. And ours was almost ready to land. It started with a reporter and a buried leak. A friend of Dana's freelance investigative journalist named Rachel Thorne got her hands on the environmental report I had submitted to the county, the one that documented chemical contamination from HOA dumping. I didn't send it to her directly. But someone inside the clerk's office must have had a conscience, because 2 days later, an article hit the local paper with the headline, "Private Farmland Contaminated by HOA Development. Environmental Violations Under Review." I woke up to a dozen calls and twice as many emails. My neighbors were stunned, some supportive, others suspicious, most just confused. Karen responded immediately. Within hours, she was knocking on doors, not to explain, but to deny. She called it a community miscommunication. She told residents the report was misinterpreted, that the soil sample was taken on an unrelated property, and that I was a disgruntled landowner with a grudge. That week, she handed out flyers, too. Professionally printed on glossy cardstock, colored in HOA blue and white, with a stock photo of smiling families under a headline that read, "Our community under attack. Stop the obstruction. Protect our progress." Beneath that was a photo of me, taken from God knows where, with a red circle around my face and the words, "Carter's campaign of disruption threatens our shared future." On the back, bullet points. All lies. Carter refuses to participate in HOA development projects. Carter has filed nuisance complaints to stall public progress. Carter has threatened to sue multiple community members. Then, in bold, speaking to media without HOA clearance may result in citation. That line was enough to chill anyone on the fence. But some folks, especially the ones who had been living under Karen's thumb for years, started to ask questions. Quietly at first. I got a knock on my door from Mrs. Lawrence down the street, a widow in her 70s, who'd lived here longer than anyone. She clutched the flyer in her hands like it was radioactive. "She threatened to fine me when my mailbox was dented," she whispered. "Said it made the neighborhood look poor." I invited her in, showed her the documents. Her eyes widened. "She forged your name?" I nodded. 3 times. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then folded the flyer in half and tucked it into her purse like evidence. "She's been doing this for years," she said. "People just didn't think we could fight her." But now they did, especially after the ribbon cutting. Karen, in her delusional pursuit of legacy, scheduled a celebration for the new community lot. Even though construction crews were still flattening the last rows of corn, she ordered a red carpet from a party rental company. She had a stage set up on the edge of the field, right in the mud. The same field my grandfather used to walk barefoot during planting season, sleeves rolled and face to the sun. And now it was a backdrop for Karen's ego parade. She even had a photographer and a balloon arch. Residents were encouraged to attend, though many said later they were pressured or reminded that skipping would affect future HOA considerations. I showed up too, but I wasn't carrying balloons. I brought the file, a binder so thick it needed both hands, packed with time-stamped photos, zoning maps, forged signatures, property tax records, permit request metadata, and a timeline of the HOA's criminal activities dating back 8 years. I walked to the front just as Karen was cutting the ribbon, surrounded by the few board members who still hadn't abandoned her. I didn't ask for a mic. I didn't need one. I pulled out a portable speaker, flipped on the preloaded audio file, and let Karen's voice fill the crowd. "Dump the sealant on the south trench. No one inspects the runoff anyway. If he complains, say it's fertilizer." Gasps. People froze. Her voice again. "Carter's land is soft, sentimental. If we squeeze hard enough, he'll sell. They always do." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The speaker went silent, and the weight of what they just heard hung in the air like a dropped cinder block. Karen tried to laugh. "That's taken completely out of context," she said, holding up her hands. "This is a deeply edited... I don't even know when I said that. Last month, I cut in. 3 days before your treasurer was caught on camera dumping toxic barrels into my irrigation. I opened the binder, pulled out the photos, and held them up like courtroom exhibits. 'This is my signature,' I said. 'And this,' I flipped the page, showing the forged one, 'is the version your office submitted to the county without my consent.'" A man in the crowd shouted, "That's a felony!" Another woman stepped forward. "She fined me for having a welcome mat that wasn't neutral colored," someone else yelled. Then the stories poured in. One neighbor said Karen told her to remove a bird bath for aesthetic reasons and fined her $200. Another, a young couple, said they received a lien thread over a flower bed that extended 6 inches into community mulch. One by one, the crowd turned, like a wind shift through a field of dry grass. Karen's expression warped. The smugness dissolved into panic. She looked to the board members beside her, but they took a step back. And then, like a dam breaking, a local journalist pushed through the crowd, Rachel Thorne, recorder in hand. "Ms. Holloway," she asked, "can you respond to the leaked recording of you authorizing illegal dumping on private property?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed. "This is a setup," she said. "This is a coordinated political attack. I decide what happens here." "So you admit you overruled county regulations?" Rachel pressed. Karen's voice pitched up, her composure fracturing in real time. "This is my neighborhood. I decide what happens here, not some outsider with a megaphone." She pointed at me, practically shaking. Cameras were rolling. Phones were out. Someone live-streamed the entire thing. Within hours, the clip hit social media. That scream, "This is my neighborhood, I decide what happens here," became an instant meme. It was shared over 80 times before midnight. Local news ran it on the evening broadcast. By the next morning, it had gone national. My inbox exploded. Talk show invites, interviews, activist groups asking for details. Karen tried to go on the defensive, but it was too late. That night, someone egged her Lexus. The following morning, someone spray-painted LIAR across the HOA clubhouse door. The board started crumbling. 3 members resigned in a single day. 2 of them emailed statements to Rachel, citing long-standing ethical concerns and repeated suppression of dissenting voices. A 4th sent me a message directly. It read, "I'm sorry. We all knew. We just didn't know how far it would go. Thank you for standing up to her." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Karen's empire wasn't just cracking. It was collapsing, piece by piece, from the inside out. And she still hadn't seen the worst of it. Because while the neighborhood was finally waking up, the federal case file was already loaded. And the warrant, her real reckoning, was about to be delivered. It ended on a Wednesday morning at exactly 6:14 a.m., just as the sun breached the horizon over the eastern ridge of my ruined field. I was on the porch with a thermos of black coffee, watching fog curl over the flattened dirt where wheat used to grow. The scars were still there, tire tracks like surgical incisions, concrete forms like tumors along the edge, but something in the air felt final, heavy. Then my phone buzzed, a single text from Levi. It read, "Now." No fanfare, no warning, just the drop. 28 minutes later, a fleet of black Suburbans pulled into the HOA complex parking lot. Federal marshals in windbreakers and body armor moved in like a tide swallowing a sandcastle. Their boots pounded the concrete. Their voices barked clear, unmistakable commands. Inside, the HOA's administrative team was just clocking in, some still holding their coffees. Then came the shouts. The echo of cuffs ratcheting shut. I wasn't there in person, but Rachel Thorne was. She streamed it live, a gift I didn't ask for, but welcomed all the same. The video showed Karen Holloway being led out of the community center in full athletic wear, a pink tank top that read "Rise, Slay," her mat still rolled under her arm, a sweatband around her forehead. Her mouth moved a mile a minute, screaming about overreach, community sabotage, and something about how this was all an assault on shared vision. But the marshals didn't flinch. One of them calmly read her rights as they walked her past the flashing cameras, her arms cuffed behind her back, hair wild and mascara smudged. "Ms. Holloway, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, falsification of federal property records, environmental violations, and tampering with federal mail infrastructure," she shrieked. "I am the HOA!" But all it did was make the headline punch harder. The news was everywhere within the hour. OA president arrested in fraud scandal, federal charges filed in land theft scheme. Dana Cho held a press conference by noon. Calm, clean, merciless. This office does not tolerate the abuse of administrative authority for personal enrichment. What we uncovered was a systematic campaign of property manipulation, document forgery, environmental sabotage, and deliberate community-level oppression under the guise of development. The defendant weaponized her office to target vulnerable homeowners, using fraud and coercion to unlawfully seize private land. That era ends today. Behind her, the seal of the U.S. Department of Justice gleamed like a gavel waiting to fall. Levi, of course, wasn't standing next to her. He'd recused himself the moment Dana took the case. But he was in the gallery when the indictment was read. Sitting 3 rows back, in the federal courthouse where his own name adorned the walls, watching as the judge, a colleague he'd mentored, listed off 37 federal charges against Karen Holloway, former president of the most tyrannical HOA in county history. And when they brought her in wearing a beige jumpsuit and shackles, her expression was no longer smug. It was hollow, like something vital had been carved out of her and thrown away. I watched the live stream from home, sitting at the same kitchen table where I'd once spread out maps, violations, photos, back when I still believed I might lose. But I didn't lose, not even close. Because the U.S. attorney didn't stop with criminal charges, they filed a civil seizure of the parking lot, of Karen's personal property, of the HOA's entire administrative fund, frozen, then gutted. The contractors abandoned the job site within 48 hours. The half-finished parking lot sat there, half-poured and useless, until a federal cleanup crew came with backhoes and bulldozers of their own. But this time, not to build, to dismantle. The rebar was hauled away, the asphalt jackhammered up, the poison drums found buried near the runoff, removed, the soil, tested, treated, and, in time, replaced. I stood on the porch the day they restored the boundary fence. It wasn't much, just cedar posts and 3 lines of wire. But when the final stake was driven into the dirt, I felt something in my chest loosen for the first time in months. It was over. Officially. Permanently. And the final ruling? Levi sent me a signed copy by courier. Stamped and certified. The parcel designated under Registry 47B223, historically known as Carter Field, shall be permanently exempt from any current or future homeowners association jurisdiction. No administrative authority, zoning override, or community ordinance may supersede this order. Further violations shall be prosecuted under federal civil rights law. That paper now hangs framed in my hallway next to my grandfather's war medals and my father's framed irrigation blueprint. But I didn't stop there. The last thing I did, the final nail in the coffin, was build a sign, a proper one. I had it carved from oak and sealed against the elements. Stood it up at the edge of the field, where the gravel road meets the grass, painted in bold black letters, private land, no trespassing, restored under federal order. Courtesy of the United States District Court, and, underneath it, in smaller letters, we do not recognize your authority here. It faces the old HOA clubhouse, which now sits empty, windows boarded, door padlocked. Karen's Lexus was towed 3 weeks after her arrest. She never reclaimed it. The neighborhood has been quiet ever since. Not defeated. Not dead. Just peaceful. I sip my coffee in the morning, the real kind. Not the jittery survival fuel I lived on during the worst of it. Birds have come back to the field. The wheat won't grow this season, but maybe next. The land's been through worse, so have I. And as I watch the sunrise stretch across the soil that nearly became a parking lot, I smile. Because Karen didn't just lose her job. She didn't just lose her power. She lost everything. In court, on camera, and under the boots of the very system she thought she could outmaneuver. And the best part? She never saw it coming. She thought this was a game of violations and fines. She never realized she was standing on federal ground. And when the hammer dropped, it didn't come from a neighbor with a shovel. It came from the gavel of a federal judge. My brother, my blood, the one man she never saw coming because she was too busy looking down on everyone else.